Hey guys, welcome to my channel today. Thank you so much for stopping by. In this video we'll be cutting and sewing this dress that you can see on your screen. So I used 3 yards of Ankara fabric for this dress. If you want yours to be longer, you can use 4 yards or 4.5 yards. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. First thing I'll do is to draft the upper bodice of this dress. So I'm going to take my points. The first point is the distance from my shoulder to my bust point, which is 10 inches. The next point is the distance from my shoulder to my under bust point, which is 13 inches. The next point is the distance from my shoulder to my waist point, which is 16 inches. And from the waist point, I went down by 5 inches for the Basque waistline. So after doing that, I'm going to rule straight lines across all these points, and I'll label the lines. First line bust line, second line under bust line, third line waistline, and the fourth line is the half length. The next thing I'll do is to take half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. I'll indicate the 8 inches. From that 8 inches, I'm going to determine the length of my sleeves. So the dress has a cut together sleeve, so you are going to determine how long you want your sleeves to be. I want my sleeves to be about 10 inches. So from the 8 inches, I placed my tape and I went out by 10 inches. So half of my shoulder measurement is 8 inches and my sleeves measurement is 10 inches. So altogether, I have 18 inches, but I have 19 inches right now. The 1 inch is going to be for the folding of the sleeve, so I'm marking out the 1 inch. So from that end, I'm going to go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and I'm going to take my neck width, which is going to be 3.5 inches. So from the center front, I'll come in by 3.5 inches and I'll indicate the 3.5 inches with a dot. The next thing I'll do now is to slant from the 3.5 inches into the shoulder slope of 1 inch like this. After doing that, we don't need to place the bust measurement, okay, because we are going to gather it. So on the under bust line, I'm going to place my under bust circumference divided by 4, okay, and you're going to add allowance to it. So altogether, like I mentioned before, I have 18 inches on the pattern paper, 19 inches. 1 inch is for the joining allowance. So what I'll do is to come inward from the other end by 4 inches. Okay, so I'm taking out 4 inches from the 18 inches on the under bust line. On the waistline, I'm going to place my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll indicate that with a dot. On the half length, I'll place my hip circumference divided by 4. I'll also indicate that. So I'll not be adding allowance to the pattern paper. I'll be adding allowance to my fabric when I'm cutting on the fabric. So what I'll do now is to connect from the under bust line, the dots on the under bust line, to meet the dots on the waistline, and from the waistline I'll connect to meet the half length like this. So after connecting, this is what I have. The next thing I'll do now is to connect from the allowance that I added on the under bust line into the bust line using my curved ruler like this. So what I did was to just take out 4 inches from the 18 inches on the under bust line. Okay, so after doing that, now I'm going to go ahead and cut. Okay, so I'm not going to cut out the 1 inch on the sleeves area. I'll be using it for the folding of the sleeves. So I'm going to make my neck width visible before cutting out the shoulder slope. Okay, so you can see that the upper bodice, that is from the shoulder to the under bust, is quite wide. We'll be gathering it to fit into these other parts of the dress. So for the front neckline, I'm going to connect all the way like this into the under bust line. That is how deep it's going to be. For the back, I'll stop on the bust line because I don't want it to be too big, but both the front and the back neckline is going to be a V neckline. So the first line is the back. I'll be using this to cut out both the front and the back. So I'll use it to cut out the back first. That is why I went ahead to trim out the back neckline first. The Basque waistline for this dress is not a V waistline, it's a U waistline. So what I did was to go up by 2.5 inches on the side, and I used my ruler to connect it to give me this shape, and I went ahead to cut it out. So this is what we'll be needing. I'll be using this to cut out the back first before cutting the front. So I went ahead to fold my fabric into 2, and I used it to cut out the back. So for the center back, I added 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance at the back. On the neckline area, I added half an inch. On the shoulder area, I added 1 inch because I'll be folding it back in for my drawstring. So on the sleeves area, I already have allowance there because I didn't cut out the 1 inch on that point. And on the base, I added half an inch. For the under bust area, I added half an inch on the upper part. On the side, remember we didn't add stitching allowance to our pattern paper, so I added 1.5 inches for my stitching allowance. And on the base, I added half an inch. Okay, so this is what I have. The next thing I'll do now is to adjust the zipper area. So on the waistline, I'm going to extend the line into the fabric, and I'll be taking half an inch away from the 1.5 inches that I left for my zipper allowance. I'm doing that just on the waistline. So what I'll do is to connect like this. I'll connect upward and I'll connect downward to eliminate zipper bulge. Okay, after doing that, I'm going to open my fabric up. Okay, so for the upper part, I have 2 pieces. For the lower part, I have 4 pieces because I'll be using the fabric as the lining for the lower part. Okay, so what you do now is to pipe the neckline and run a gather stitch on the base of this upper bodice. Okay, to cut out the front, I'm going to adjust the neckline. So the depth of the front neckline is going all the way to the under bust line, so I'll trim that out, and I'm going to place my pattern paper on my fabric. So this time the under bust part should be on fold because it's the front. Okay, so on the shoulder, I added 1 inch. On the neckline area, I added half an inch. On the base, I added half an inch. On the side, I added 1.5 inches for my stitching allowance, just like I did for the back. So I have 2 pieces for the upper bodice and I have 2 pieces for the lower bodice. So the main fabric and the lining piece for the lower bodice. So next thing I'll do is to either pipe the neckline or cut out a facing for it. After doing that, I'll run a gather stitch on the base. So I've gone ahead to sew my neckline in place. So I cut out my fabric and I used it to pipe it. What I have to do now is to iron it flat. I also went ahead to run a gather stitch on the base. So we're going to gather this to fit into the under bust area. Okay, so first thing you do is to measure what you have on the under bust area. What I have is 18 inches. I'll divide the 18 inches into 2 because I have 2 pieces here, so it is 9 inches. So each of this panel, I'm going to gather it to be 9 inches. So after gathering, you're going to notch the center of the under bust fabric. Okay, so you notch it. After notching, now you're going to start pinning this one from the center. Okay, so each of them, I'll gather them to be 9 inches and I'm going to place them from the center, as you can see me doing. On that notch, I'm going to place the first one and I'll arrange it in place. I'll use my pins to hold everything down, as you can see me doing. So for the second one, you're going to figure out where to place it. So you can overlap it just like I'm doing. I'm overlapping it because I don't want my bust to show. Okay, but if you want to place them side by side, go ahead and place them side by side. For me, I'm going to place this on the other one and then I'm going to go ahead and pin, arrange everything in place and pin all the way to the end. You're going to cut out your lining piece. Okay, so I'll be using my main fabric as my lining piece. After pinning, I'll check what I have on the right side. If it's okay, I'm going to notch the center of my lining piece. Okay, and I'm going to place it center to center. The notch that I had earlier, I'm going to place this on the notch. Okay, and I'm going to pin. After pinning, I'll head over to my sewing machine to sew using half an inch. So after sewing, this is what it should look like. The rough edges of the stitching is now inside the main fabric and the lining piece. So this is what it's going to look like. So I overlapped it. You can see what my neckline is looking like. Okay, so this is how I want it to be. So I've gone ahead to sew in place and this is what I have for the front. You can see how neat is looking on the wrong side also. So for the back, I've piped the neckline like I said before. I used my fabric to just sew it and I turned it to the right side. I've also gone ahead to run a gather stitch on the base. So for this under bust part, I have 4 pieces, 2 main piece and 2 lining piece. So I'm also going to measure what I have now on the under bust point, which is about 10.5 inches. I'm going to gather this part to be 10.5 inches and I'll place them on it. Okay, so when you are gathering, do not gather the zipper allowance area too much. Okay, so after gathering into the 10.5 inches, I'm going to place it on the under bust, right side facing right side, and I'll arrange it and pin all the way. After pinning, you are going to use your lining piece to cover it, just like we did for the front. Cover it up with the lining piece, and then you are going to go ahead and sew. So the next thing I'll do now is to pin the other one, just like I did before. Arrange them in place, pin, and then use your lining piece to cover it up. Okay, so I'll go ahead and gather, I'll pin to it, and I'll cover it up with my lining piece. I'll head over to my sewing machine to sew everything in place. After sewing everything in place, guys, this is what I have for the back. You can see how neat it looks on the front and at the back. So the next thing I'll do now is to join both front and back shoulders together. I'm going to place them right side facing right side, and I'll pin the shoulders in place. So after pinning, I'm going to hem my sleeves opening first before I join the shoulders together. Okay, so pin the shoulders, go ahead and use the 1 inch. Remember, I added 1 inch to the sleeves area, which I'll be using to hem. I'm going to hem the sleeves opening on the 4 sides, okay, before joining the shoulders together. So after hemming, I'm going to join the shoulders using 1 inch because I added 1 inch to the shoulder area for the joining allowance. After sewing the front and the back shoulder, this is what I have. The next thing I'll do now is to open up the seam, as you can see, and I'm going to run 2 straight stitches on the seam for the drawstring. Okay, so just go ahead and do that. I've done that for the other side, and this is what it looks like. So it should look like this on the inside, and it should look like this on the outside. The next thing you do now is to cut out the fabric that you'll be using for the drawstring. So I've sewn the second one in place. So this is the fabric I'll be using for the drawstring. The length should be as long as you want it. The wideness for mine is 1 inch. Okay, so what I'll do now is to fold it. It is just 1 inch, so I'm not going to sew it and turn it inside out. So I'll fold in half an inch on one end, okay, and I'll fold in another half an inch on the other end. Then I'll fold them together and I'm going to sew on it. Okay, so I'm going to sew all the way to the end. You cut out 4 pieces of this. Okay, so after sewing, this is what I have. So I'm going to pass this rope now through the casing that I have made on the shoulder area. So I'll be using my bobbin pin. I'll tie the rope to the bobbin pin on one end. I'm going to pass it through the neckline area. Okay, you're passing through the neckline area all the way to the other end. So after passing it, you're not going to drag it completely. You leave excess fabric on the neckline area so that you head over to your sewing machine to stitch the ropes down. Okay, after passing the first one, I went ahead to pass the second one. So what I'll do is to hold them down on the neckline area. Okay, I'll head over to my sewing machine to stitch it down so it does not move. After doing that, I'll arrange my upper bodice together and I'm going to sew the side using my stitching allowance. So I've gone ahead to sew everything in place. I've also tacked the drawstring area on the neckline area. So this is what it looks like. So you can drag it and close it like this, or you can leave it loose. So this is what I have. I repeated the same thing for the other side. Okay, so the next thing you do now is to cut out fabric for the gathers. So you're going to open the upper bodice up and you're going to measure around the waistline. Let's call it the waistline for now. Okay, whatever you have here, you are going to times it by 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how full you want the base of your dress to be. Okay, so I'm using 3 yards, so the whole 3 yards is what I have to gather to this part of my dress, and this is what I have. It is folded into 2. The length of my gathers is 21 inches, so the full length of my dress is 38 inches. I'll be using 2 inches to fold the hem, so although total length of my dress is 36 inches. So on the center, I'll come down by about 1 inch. I'll just slant it a bit. Okay, this is for the basque area, because I want it to sit well. You know, it's not straight on the basque area. I want it to sit well. I'm going to notch the center. After notching the center, I'll head over to my sewing machine to gather this old fabric to what I have on the waistline. I've gone ahead to gather, and this is what I have. So the next thing I'll do now is to start pinning. Okay, so I'm going to notch the center of the upper bodice, and I've already notched the center of the gathers, so I'm going to pin them center to center. I'll arrange everything in place and I'll pin them. After pinning, I'll head over to my sewing machine to sew using 1/2 inch. After sewing the gathers in place, I went ahead to close up the back, leaving only the zipper allowance. So this is what I have. So the next thing I'll do now is to fix my zipper to the back of my dress. Okay, after doing that, I'm going to hem the base of my dress all the way around. And yeah, that is all for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to like this video, leave your questions in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.